New York these days is a tale of two cities. Wall Street bonuses are eye-popping. Average apartments cost more than $1 million. And it seems as if there's a new apartment building going up on every corner. Yet not everyone is feeling so flush. Many people have simply given up looking for jobs, and many of those who work make so little that they're living below the poverty line. They've joined the ranks of what we call the working poor. What is the city's obligation to its poor? If we increase the amount of public assistance, does that increase their dependency? I'm Sarah Bartlett, and this is our topic today on USA Inc. Joining us today is Harvey Robbins, a former official of the Koch and Dinkins administrations who spent 7 years working as the policy director at the Children's Aid Society and now consults with nonprofits. Harvey, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you, Sarah.
You were, for a number of years, the number 2 at the Social Services Agency for the city, and you've certainly spent a long time at Children's Aid. What's your sense of the scope of the problem here in New York?
Well, you won't read about it, is my first response to it. There are some 1.8 million people in the city that, according to the federal guidelines, are living in poverty. And there's another 1 million people on top of that that teeter on the edge of poverty. And when you add the two groups together, there are 2.8 million people.
That's what, about a quarter of the population?
Closer to a third.
Wow.
And so the headlines are about downtown and Wall Street and what's happening with the latest development transaction. But the real transactions that I focused on are what's happening in neighborhoods and the dire need that people have in the city, many of whom are children and many of whom are tremendously without the kind of food that they need. There are some 1,100 or more than 1,100 soup kitchens and food pantries in the city. And in the last 5 years, the demand for food in these local organizations has grown 40%. So over 1 million people every day line up at a soup kitchen or a food pantry for a meal. Again, something you won't read about, but it does speak to the disconnect between downtown and neighborhoods throughout the city.
Now, I think this may come as a shock to some people that the extent of poverty in New York is as bad as it is. How is it possible that you not only don't read about it, but there's a large sense from some parts of our population that you don't see it, you don't feel it, you don't know about it?
Well, I think a lot of it, has to do with the changing nature of the media today. When I came of age 40 years ago, there were a number of journalists and editors allowed a lot more freedom in terms of the media being able to write stories. And so when I grew up and the writing, both in newspapers and in books, poverty was a very, very integral part of America. And one of the stories that I like to tell is that the last cabinet meeting that John Kennedy had before he went to Dallas, where he was assassinated, he scribbled on a piece of paper, a notepad, poverty, and he kept circling and circling it, and he handed it to Robert Kennedy. And Kennedy, when he became senator, was very much driven and made many visits across America to find out what truly was happening to the issue of the poor. That just doesn't exist today, Sarah.
Why do you think in New York City, with the economic policies of the administration that have been largely declared a success, we've rebounded from 2001, all of the economic statistics are showing that we're going in the right direction, why would it be that you'd have worse poverty, more people lining up for the soup kitchen lines than 5 years ago?
Well, I guess one of the things that I learned in government was that data really matters, and it depends upon what counts. One of the interesting statistics is that over the last 20 years, really the number of jobs has not increased in the city. And if you look into the number of jobs that are currently here, many of them are part-time jobs. They are counted as part of the full-time job counts that economists look at. And so what we're having is a large number of people that are working part-time and working at wages that have been stagnant for 30 years for the vast majority of people earning in the lower 4/5 of the wage category. Only the top 20% have made out like bandits. The wage stagnation coupled with a change in policies around benefits, the erosion of benefits, so that health care now has become something that is very rare, especially in the low wage jobs where employers basically are hiring people at a flat salary and with no benefits, no sick leave, no vacation time. And so the changing nature of work over the last 30 or 40 years, we haven't really taken the time to understand that it's not just a number that we hear every month in an unemployment statistic. It's about the fact that it's taking longer for people that have become unemployed to get a job. Many times when they get that job, it may take much longer, and it is happening here in New York, that it's taking longer to find the job if they're laid off. They're not coming back at the same salary, and the benefits are less. And so I don't think the kind of energy and the kind of focus on what's behind the numbers and what counts. And so there's been a distortion about, as your question implied, about the boom times. And it seems to me that daily we define what's good or bad about what's happening in the stock exchange. Well, for people that are poor, they're not in this game.
What kinds of public policy responses could there be to this level of poverty in the city?
Well, I think there are three major things, three major policies that, and what's so great about these three is there's nothing new, there's nothing very sexy about them. One is the fact that there are only 14 or 15 states in the country that went on their own and didn't wait for the federal government to increase the minimum wage.
And we're one of those?
And we're one of those. And by next January, that minimum wage, which was $5.15 3 years ago, will be $7.10 over a 3-year period. It increased. So in the past, again 40 years ago, when there were incremental increases to the minimum wage, Congress is AWOL now on it. So that's one issue. So whether we do it on a federal level, which I would like to see, and then I would like to see it indexed. The minimum wage should be $8, $9 an hour, and then, which would make up for all of the years that it hadn't been increased.
So when it gets to 7, you don't feel that we can declare victory. We need to keep raising it.
It's a good start, but I mean, my dream would be 10 and 10. $10 an hour in the year 2010. Make it another dollar, approximately $1 a year, and then index it. And then it's not about coming for a vote. You don't have to go to either the federal government or you go to the state legislature, which is what happened in New York. It would be an automatic increase, not unlike what we do with Social Security. If it's a low amount of inflation, it's a low amount of an increase in the minimum wage. The second thing is a program called the Earned Income Tax Credit. And that is basically geared toward giving a tax credit for people that are in low-wage jobs. And that could mean $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a year to a person's income tax when they file it. The problem is that it is so onerous and so difficult to do that it takes people to help people to fill out something which should be much more simplified and much more easily to obtain. So if we raise the minimum wage, to say $10 an hour, if the earned income tax credit, which Mayor Bloomberg has made a major effort to try to get more people enrolled through local groups to help people fill out the forms and the like, there are still some 250,000 people in New York City that are eligible for an earned income tax credit. It doesn't cost $1 to an employer. It doesn't cost $1 to the city. It's literally a tax refund that you and I might get off
and
of
it's
our
about the forms. It's getting people to help.
It's about access and about making it in a way that is easily accessible. And then the third area, which again goes back 40 years ago, with the food stamp program. Again, this last piece is a program that is totally federally funded. It doesn't cost the city or the state any money. It doesn't cost the employer any money. But what it does, it can, depending upon the way, very complicated budgeting process for each family, depending upon the number of people in the family, a family of 4, for example, with a federal poverty level of just over $20,000, might receive, depending upon what their rent is and what their salaries are and what their utilities are, they could earn over $300 a month in food stamps.
And they're not now?
And there are 1,100,000 people now on food stamps, but there are another 600,000 more that are eligible and not participating. That 600,000 people translates into over $650 million will leaving on the doorsteps of Washington, D.C. It could be in people's pockets here in New York and in grocery stores tomorrow.
Well, you'll explain in a minute why we're not taking advantage of that. We'll be right back.
The Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College of the City University of New York is the largest and most diverse accredited business school in the United States, offering high-quality, full-time and part-time degree programs at the undergraduate, master's, and PhD levels. For information about the Zicklin School of Business, please visit our website, zicklin.baruch.cuny.edu. That's zicklin.baruch.cuny.edu.
Welcome back. I'm speaking with Harvey Robbins, a nonprofit consultant. Harvey, tell us a little bit more why we're not availing ourselves of this money that you said we're leaving on the doorstep.
Well, I think a lot of it is comes under what I would call sort of the rubric of a philosophical perspective on the issue of welfare and work. In the past, people that were receiving welfare automatically received food stamps. And during the Giuliani administration, his policies were about reducing welfare very, very quickly. And while he succeeded in what he defined as a success, the city was sued and lost over $50 million.
Sued for
illegally eliminating people from food stamps that were entitled to this benefit. And again, the press celebrated his success. I mourned it because by tying the two, he solidified what food stamps meant in people's minds. For me, food stamps was and has always been an extension of work and an extension of wages in a way that doesn't hurt the employer or the city's budget. And so
let me just make sure, you mean that people who don't make a lot, who are employed but who aren't making a lot of money in those jobs, this is a way to increase their salaries, if you will, by using federal money to support them for their food.
That's correct. And for a family of 4, they could receive as much as, on average, say $300 additional every month.
Which is a lot.
For a family of 3, $220 a month. And
so Giuliani made that more difficult. And how about the current administration?
He made it more difficult, and he also added one more hurdle. He imposed a requirement of fingerprinting as part of the application process. And
what was the logic behind that?
The logic for that was to create as many different hurdles as possible to curb access to benefits. And so this was not a federal requirement. It was not a state requirement. There are, however, 4 states, I believe, that still have fingerprinting as a requirement. But Mayor Bloomberg, when he came into office, had a choice. He could continue what I call the philosophical ideology of tying or linking welfare and food stamps, as opposed to cutting that link and understanding that food stamps can be a wage supplement. And when I was giving you the statistics about 600,000 people that are eligible but not participating, most of the people that are eligible and not participating are the working poor. So we're not talking about a welfare mom that is not working. We're talking about people that are actively seeking work or are working and are eligible for this food stamp benefit, even though they are working. And so my joining food stamps was always about the extension of wages through the purchasing of food in local grocery stores.
The mayor's been quoted as saying, you know, he believes that people should work for their money, and you're saying they are working.
That's correct.
Why would it be not in his interest to encourage people who are working to take advantage of the federal food stamp program?
Well, I have to admit, it's a great question, one that I have asked myself many times. I don't quite understand the logic. Mayor Bloomberg has embarked upon a very aggressive and what I consider a laudable civic agenda of really putting a focus on affordable housing and putting a focus on public education. Both are going to require long-term, serious investments on the part of the city's budget to realize these 2 very important goals. But here's an immediate need that can be responded to literally by taking the very laudable program that he put into place, which is the 311 telephone technology system, and which he is very proud of and should be, about improving access for the citizenry to make sure that the garbage is being collected or if there's some problem with the city service. But he doesn't link the issue of access to an immediate response to a real-world problem. He likes to talk about responses to real-world problems that the city is encountering. And he's also been a tremendous advocate for federal money. And we could cite as recently as the Homeland Security example, and we could also cite the example of his aggressive and correct stand on gun control. So he doesn't lack for an understanding and an ability to use the bully pulpit for, again, very important, laudable areas of city life. I can't answer the question. It doesn't make any sense to leave $650 million on the doorstep of Washington that you don't have to spend 1 hour lobbying for. It makes no sense not to put more money into people who have chosen a lifestyle of work and not to be able to supplement it because he's decided to retain fingerprinting, because story after story stories that are written about the welfare offices, about the bureaucratic snafus and how long it takes, and there are 2 lawsuits that are now pending and during his watch as mayor. One, because he wholesaled eliminated people on food stamps when they moved from the welfare program to the federally supported SSI program if you were disabled. He just immediately took them off. Well, most other cities didn't cut off welfare. So
let me make sure I understand. If somebody was on welfare and were moved to the program for the disabled because they were disabled, they no longer get food stamps?
He made a decision to have them go through the hoop again, the bureaucratic hoop of re-enrolling, and many people did not participate in that. The second suit is that there was a study done and over a period of time, and a third of the people that were entitled to food stamps were denied food stamps. We are nationally 36th in the country in terms of the relationship between the number of people that are eligible versus the number of people participating. And we have one of the highest denial rates. What are we denying people that are entitled to a benefit? The people that are poor in the city or that teeter on the verge of poverty. I don't understand the logic when so much of what this mayor has done for the city has been aggressively correct.
I mean, they do like to point out that the number of people who are enrolled in the food stamp program has gone up since the Bloomberg administration began. So I think that they do get credit for some increase in the rolls.
Well, again, Sarah, I would challenge you on, I mean, it's great that they say it, but you have to remember that when Rudy was in office, the numbers of people on food stamps were reduced from 1.5 million to 700,000. So Mike is now back to 1.1 million. But in 1995, there were 1,500,000 people receiving food stamps. So yes, he dug us out of a hole based upon a policy of intimidation and reducing or eliminating access as much as possible to a group of people because of his link between food stamps and welfare. So while Mike has brought the food stamp roll up up to 1.1 million, in looking at the HRA statistics, the social service agency that administers the program, there were 1,097,000 people enrolled in food stamps in April, which is the latest number. The number was 1,091,000 a year ago. 6,000 people net increase, 600,000 people waiting.
I guess it's not comparable numbers. One of the, I think, most clear-cut examples of this sort of philosophical debate arose over this the waiver that you could apply for. Why don't you just explain what happened there? Because, I mean, I know it doesn't have a huge impact, but I think it's indicative of this issue.
Well, I mean, basically, the federal government requires people that are receiving food stamps to at least try to be engaged in work or looking for work for single adults, which is what this waiver is about. Requires people to be working 80 days within a 3-month period. But the federal government allowed cities and localities to apply for a waiver, and they were automatically given them.
Was it 80 hours in a 3 months?
Yeah,
Not 80 days.
I'm sorry, 80
yeah.
hours
Okay.
in a 3-month period. And so it was basically a piece of paper transaction to the state, and it was approved. What happened, and each year that Mayor Bloomberg was in office, he had an opportunity, again, just like eliminating food stamps, he had an opportunity to say, I'm going to apply for this waiver, and I think the number is about 13,000 people is what people were estimating were the people that were impacted by this, single adults, able-bodied single adults looking for work. And so year after year, the mayor said no, 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 no. And the deputy mayor for social services and the commissioner of social services this year went ahead and applied for the waiver. And here's what I don't know what happened between the lip and the cup. The mayor read in the New York Times that this waiver was being sought, and advocates for the poor and others were delighted about the mayor's change in policy. And whether he was briefed or not briefed fully or whatever, within a 24-hour period, they were withdrawing the request from the state for this waiver.
Well, I guess that's about as clear-cut an example of this position they're taking as possible. We've been very fortunate to have Harvey Robbins, a nonprofit consultant, with us. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Sarah.
We'll be right back.
Some people think of New York as the world's second home. The City University of New York, with students coming from 90 countries and speaking more than 155 languages, is the world's first university. Find us on the web at cuny.edu or call us at 1-800-CUNY-YES.
Despite the city's economic rebound over the last few years, hunger, poverty, and homelessness are actually worse than they were 5 years ago. More than 1 million New Yorkers, including over 400,000 children, live with some uncertainty of where their next meal will come from. While the number of city residents receiving food stamps has risen under the Bloomberg administration, it would be even higher if the mayor chose to abandon his seemingly blanket philosophical objection to helping those who are not working. But there are many legitimate reasons why people cannot find jobs. Expecting nonprofit soup kitchens to assume the burden of feeding the poor when federal money could instead be used for that purpose seems an overly zealous application of ideology. The new City Council Speaker, Christine Quinn, has made it a priority to tackle New Yorkers' hunger problem. Since President Bush and Congress have recently reduced their funding for federal programs that support soup kitchens, and both Governor Pataki and Mayor Bloomberg have proposed similar cuts, her support comes not a moment too soon. For USA Inc., I'm Sarah Bartlett.